Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live, talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynn@pghcitypaper.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Well, hello there. Welcome to another day in the longest week of my life. It feels like I was done in on Monday. It is Wednesday, September 26th. The hearing, the kangaroo court is what I suspect it will be, regarding Judge Kavanaugh and his female accuser, Dr. Ford, Blasey Ford. I'm not clear how she refers to herself. At any rate, that is scheduled for tomorrow. And assuming that does, in fact, happen tomorrow, I am not going to, as I said before, do a show because I know you, and you will not be listening to my show if I do a show at the same time this hearing is on. And anyway, I want to hear the hearing, kind of. I am going to heavily medicate myself. I'll probably watch it from my bed where I feel maybe safer. I can't even imagine what it's going to be. Well, I can, and I don't want to go there. So we do understand that the Republicans have, as they said they would, decided it was the better part of valor to hide behind a woman's skirts in this. So they plucked out of, I believe, Arizona, some woman who is an attorney, a prosecutor, who has worked in the area of sexual abuse. And so she's been brought in to ask the questions of these two that the Republican senators are uncomfortable doing. I don't recall another instance of something like that happening. I do not. So what is it going to be? All those men going to be sitting there? Sitting, and this woman is going to come in, so it'll be woman on woman, to ask questions that the men find too icky to ask, or make them look too aggressive, make them look like they're beating up on a victim. What cowards. What extraordinary cowards. And I suppose if they had somehow managed to seat one Republican female senator on the Judiciary Committee, would they have just simply passed the ball to her? Yeah, women come in handy every once in a while. Now, I'm trying to recall what Mitch McConnell, the loathsome, there are not adjectives slimy and revolting enough to apply to him. I believe McConnell called this prosecutor, the woman they're going to hide behind, he called her the female assistant. I mean, right there. Sorry, Mitch, you done it again. That is so extraordinarily condescending. She's a prosecutor. She's not a female assistant to you lofty gentlemen. She's the one you're shoving out in front to take the heat. it reminded me of a story from my life. I don't know if I should share it, but I will. I used to co-host the Cerebral Palsy Telethon on WTAE TV for years and years and years. And my co-host was Joe DiNardo, the meteorologist. And Joe never referred to me as his co-host. Joe called me his assistant. And at the time, again, this is just the kind of crap that women deal with, and I remember laughing about it with people. I was the co-host, but to him, I couldn't be. I had to be an assistant. And I also recall the producer at one point, the day before the telethon, asking me what shoes I'd be wearing. A question, by the way, that would never have been asked of Joe. What shoes are you going to be wearing? And I said, I really hadn't thought about it. She said, well, last year in the 2 shots, that means when Joe and I were standing together, she said, you really look like you were towering over him. And that's just, it doesn't look right. So I think you'd be more comfortable. I think you'd be more comfortable in flats. This was a female producer, by the way. I said, what? You mean it's against the law to for a woman to be taller than a man? And she said, well, it doesn't look right. It just doesn't look right. The man has to be ascendant. The woman has to be lesser. I did not wear flats. I also didn't wear spike heels because I never did, but I wore comfortable shoes with maybe a heel like that. And yeah, I was a bit taller than Joe DiNardo. Now, if, in other words, what's odd is that if they wanted people to look like they were the exact same height, that wasn't the problem. If you had a 6'5" man and a 5'3" woman, nobody would have been upset by it. Just looks odd. It's just so out of balance. No, but what was out of balance was the assumption that the man would supersede, would overpower, would look down on the female assistant. So when I saw McConnell call this woman the female assistant, oh God, again, I tell you guys, the floods of memories, the constant crap that women get that men never, ever, 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 ever get. And it's all about making the men look good. Up to there and then some. The New York Times has some suggested questions for the female assistant to ask Kavanaugh. I wonder if... I'll give you a few of them. Your friend Mr. Judge, that's the guy who was supposedly there when the assault happened, Mr. Judge has written extensively of his heavy drinking during those years. In his memoir about being a teenage alcoholic, he wrote that he drank too much and did stupid things. Most of the time, everyone, including the girls, was drunk. His yearbook page includes the quote, "Certain women should be struck regularly, like gongs." Now, I got to tell you, remember yesterday when I was talking about, was there anyone overseeing this yearbook? Can you imagine an adult letting a boy put as his, on his page, they're allowed what? To have some quote from somebody? And this SOB puts on his page that women should be struck regularly? It's a fine school. I see that the elite would want their sons to go there to learn values. Anyway, haven't even gotten to the question yet. The memoir, his memoir included a character, Bart O'Kavanaugh, who drank so much that he threw up in the car and passed out. Was that you? And could he be correct in his description of these events? Now, do you think Brett Kavanaugh is going to say that Brett O'Kavanaugh was not him? Absolutely not. And it was a book, and I'm not. Another reason that Mr. Judge should obviously be there as well, to be questioned. Another suggested question. You told Fox News that you have, quote, always treated women with dignity and respect, end quote. Do you stand categorically by that statement? And then the follow-ups. Your high school yearbook page includes the phrase Renata alumnius. A classmate of yours, Sean Hagen, explained that Renata was a girl at a nearby high school, and the reference to her by you and others on the football team was meant as a boast of sexual conquest. Is that what you meant by the phrase? And do you believe this is treating women with dignity and respect? At Yale, you were a member of Delta Kappa Epsilon, which was reputed to disrespect women. The fraternity was suspended from campus after a video showed recruits chanting, "No means yes, yes means anal." Were you aware of any behavior like this? And if so, do you believe that it amounts to treating women with dignity and respect? Also at Yale, you belonged to an all-male secret society called Truth and Courage, which was known by the nickname Tit and Clit. Were you aware of this nickname? If so, do you believe it treats women with dignity and respect? In your nationally televised acceptance of President Trump's nomination of you to the Supreme Court, you said this: "No president has ever consulted more widely or talked with more people from more backgrounds to seek input about a Supreme Court nomination than this president." Could you provide the committee with any evidence for that assertion? And do you still stand by that assertion? That's just a handful. And maybe if the female assistant, the girl, oh, that reminds me of another one. My first television anchor job, I got that in the 70s in Madison, Wisconsin, WISC TV, a CBS affiliate. I was not, I was the first woman to anchor a newscast in that market. So it was a big deal when I got it. And I had it for not very long. I'd say maybe about 3, 4, 5 months. And a new general manager was brought in, the guy who ran the station. His name was Dwayne Shermer. Rumor had it he was the son-in-law of the owner. He came in and called a meeting of the newsroom employees and said at that meeting that the audience did not want to hear news from a girl. That girls lacked credibility. Their voices did not suggest authority. And so there would be immediate changes in the format of the news. And he proceeded to outline a newscast in which I was still there. I was sitting at the table. And the format went something like this. Ted will do the first block of stories, the big news. Maybe the girl, he never called me, maybe the girl could read, I can't remember. I remember sitting in that room. And again, this was before there was sexual harassment as a thing. This was just the way it was. And it went on and on. If there's a light story, the girl could read that. She could, segue into the weather. I went home. I also took notes during this meeting. I went home and told my husband, who was at the time, I think, about a second-year law student at the University of Wisconsin. And he was as outraged as I. And he said, well, first thing tomorrow, he says, you file a grievance with your union, and I will file something with the National Labor Relations Board. And that made news that I took on the station. And the station, it never got all the way to the NLRB. It never got to a judiciary kind of a setting, because when the station saw, first of all, the public reaction, I still have just a huge bunch of letters written to me at the time from people, which is very gratifying. Anyway, they backed off. I was reinstated within a week or two. I got all the newspaper headlines to prove it. But that's the kind of shit that just followed us. By the way, also at that station, it was not unusual while reading the news to the camera, and we did not have teleprompters. So the job was to take in as much as you could from the script, look up, maintain really good eye contact, back down. It was a lot tougher. And there were guys behind the camera, old guys behind the camera. There aren't anymore. Those are robotic cameras. And the guys often thought it funny to like moon you during the news so that you're looking at this is the way it used to be, I guess, the good old days. I just want to say again that this outrage by women is not something that's going to get put back in the bottle ever again. It was odd because, you know, on the New York Times front page today, you had on one side, you had Kavanaugh and stories about the president absolutely discounting the second woman now with what she said, saying she's got nothing. She thinks maybe it was him, maybe not. She admits she was drunk. That's our president. Not prejudging or anything. So Mitch McConnell, the loathsome one, intends to have this hearing tomorrow, and then what? He intends to vote, have a vote Friday, plow right through, do what's got to be done, look like you're listening, and then get him on the court. Swear him in on Monday. Big rush here. This is the most unseemly spectacle of government, our current corrupted government in action that, I don't know, maybe that I've ever seen. Probably not. Little Tony writes, Lynn, that was a bunch of great questions that won't be asked. They should be. That won't be asked by the Republicans' assistant. Will the Democrats be asking them? There you go. Yeah, I would imagine the Democrats will be asking them. And thank God they're there. And so you had a front page New York Times with the president dismissing a victim's story, and then these suggested questions for the girl assistant to the Republican men. And then you had a picture of Bill Cosby, America's dad, being led away in handcuffs. I don't know. Power corrupts. So, was it not fitting and proper that the President of the United States was openly derided at the General Assembly yesterday? I don't recall any other American president being laughed at to his face by representatives of the other nations of the world. And what was funny is the president who was being laughed at is the one who I believe came into office always squawking about the fact that they're laughing at America all the time. We're a laughing stock to these nations. Well, I don't know, Donald, because I don't think we saw that laughter until you stood up doing your usual braggadocio about being the greatest, the best. And, of course, that is laughable. It was shocking to him because he usually says that to respectful crowds. Oh, dear. So, I don't know, guys. I mean, I really am fearful about watching that tomorrow. I think I'll take double my blood pressure meds. I think I'll have a bottle of Xanax standing by and maybe some booze. I don't know. What's it going to take to get me through? Jeez. Wow. And meanwhile, I don't know how much... I don't know how much... Do we want to take a call to see if... excuse me. Assuming you can hear me okay. We are hoping that maybe the caller... Do we hope the caller thing is better? So I just need anybody. You could just call and say testing 1 2 1 2. So it'd be nice if somebody would call before the show's up. You got 34 minutes, okay? Somebody to call in. There is a local story about sexual assault at a local museum that was broken by Bill O'Driscoll, formerly of Pittsburgh City Paper, often a guest on this show. Bill moved on to our FM station, not our FM station, the public FM station, WESA, the NPR station, and where he joined Chris Potter, a lot of refugees from these parts. And they're doing some damn good journalism over there. And Bill O'Driscoll has written a long, detailed piece about sexual assault allegations by a number of women against one man at the museum who, despite their allegations, was allowed to stay for a very, very long time. I saw that Tony Norman of the Post-Gazette retweeted the story and praised its assiduous journalism. So all that is good. What happened is that a small group of women who worked at the Mattress Factory, women eventually talk. And they all, at one point, were stunned to find out that they had something in common, namely sexual abuse at the hands of a single man male coworker, who, by the way, is never named in this account, I don't believe. Starting last February, no fewer than 6 women came forward to museum officials alleging sexual harassment, sexual assault, and in 2 cases, rape. None of the women ever went to the police. This is just classic. But both the alleged victims and others who have worked at the Mattress Factory say the response from the administration of the museum was really, really distressing. From downplaying the severity of the allegations to not responding or taking their fears or their safety seriously. And just Monday of this week, 3 former, a lot of these women ended up leaving. I think some were actually lost their jobs. 3 former and 1 current Mattress Factory employee have filed a complaint against the Mattress Factory with the National Labor Relations Board. So this is potentially an ugly and big story. And I haven't read the PG today, and I don't know if it has the story, but probably not yet. This seems to have been broken by WESA and Bill O'Driscoll. We have a caller. Let's. This is a test. This is only a test. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. You sound like you're buried under 20,000 blankets.
You can't hear me.
Are you talking normally?
Yes.
Okay. It's really ridiculously low. I can't hear you.
Okay, I'll hang up then.
Thank you, though. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Moving on with the monologue du jour. Guys, I don't think this is the show that you signed up for. It's not the show I signed up for. It's called a talk show, not because I just talk. It's called a talk show because the audience gets to talk. Feel free to email, as I had said, at lynn@pghcitypaper.com until we get the effing problem solved here. Chuck writes, by scheduling the vote on Friday, McConnell and his crew are blatantly signaling that they do not care what comes out at yeah, right. They're not going to be there. They'll appear to be there. If they wanted to make it look like they care about what these women have to say, they would put off the vote to at least Tuesday. By scheduling the vote on Friday, they wrap this up before the weekend and hope we all forget by Monday. Pitiful. Yeah, it's an unseemly, repulsive, I'm running out of adjectives for these people, display. And I just think women are you're going to see more women at the polls this November. Going to blow people's minds. Mary writes, "Oh man, I had the same experience being the first woman hired in the late 70s. After I had the audacity to stand up to their bullshit right out of the gate." See, I didn't. I was promptly blackballed. Yes, another hideous education, but here we are. You're still standing. What worries me is the young women of today are still brainwashed with our men are God society. I'm still trying to find out how we've gotten to this place in our country's history. How are we able to miss the bigoted, moronic people sitting right next to us? Despite the angst, your language, Mary, today is really, I'm getting around it. Besides this is digging up for us old warriors, maybe we need to address this ridiculous mess again. Damn, gotta say, the blouse you're fashioning is fabulous. Well, thank you. Not too busy? Love it, and you too. Thank you, Mary. Appreciate it. So the WESA story, I guess we can post that. Do you, if you can find it, because it really is long. It is long. And extremely detailed. And the guy who doesn't come off well is the guy whose name I have managed to avoid saying for like the last 25 years because I don't know how to pronounce it. You know who I'm talking about? The guy who, lived with Barbara Ludorowski, the founder of the Mattress Factory, who died recently. And this guy who was quite a bit younger than her, but who they were a couple, I guess. And his name is Michael Olenek. It's got too many consonants in one place. So I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he's the one that these women took their complaint to. OLIJNYK. Olniak? I wonder. Anyway, he. And he and Barbara Ludorowski built that museum together. They lived there. And it's well known, renowned, big tourist draw, and all of that. And it says, the article says, but while the Mattress Factory is known publicly for its progressive stance, internally it functions much like other medium-sized arts organization. Of its staff of nearly 50, 2/3 are part-timers. Many employees started there as interns or volunteers and stayed on part-time. Many call it their dream job. They're low paid. They don't have any say about how things work there, but they do it because they love it. But on February 23rd, one of them, the one who had reached out to the other victims, sat down in Olenik's, I don't know how to pronounce his office, and told him that her male coworker had sexually assaulted and sexually harassed her for 3 years. And she said Michael seemed very, very concerned. He seemed to take it very seriously. It seemed like he was going to do something about it. I felt like a weight had been lifted. And then she said he interviewed 4 other alleged victims, and a 5th woman turned in a written statement. By the way, 4 of these 5 women no longer work there. 11 weeks 11 weeks after that initial interview, the woman got a letter from Olenek, I don't know, saying that the investigation had been completed, and that the specific male employee, the alleged rapist and sexual assaulter and harasser, had received and completed workplace harassment training. End of story. He added in the letter, the Mattress Factory respects the dignity and professionalism of each of its employees and is committed to maintaining a work environment that is free from discrimination and unlawful harassment. The woman who got the letter said, I felt demoralized. I mean, they weren't doing anything. The perp still worked at the museum. Most employees still did not know anything about these allegations. She feared there'd be other victims, other incidents. So a lot of people expressed concern. They told him they felt uncomfortable working at the museum. And he asked, did something happen to you? And she said, no, but something's happening to some other people. He says, well, if nothing happened to you, then why are you uncomfortable? And I said, well, I'm uncomfortable because I'm working in a close environment every single day with someone who had sexually assaulted or harassed people while they were working at the museum. I had to kind of explain it to him why I would feel uncomfortable working with a rapist. And then he charged, the boss charged that the employee was leading a mob against him and the museum. She began fearing she'd be fired. She was not, but she left that meeting in tears. Other women having similar meetings also described the same kind of very unsatisfactory interview. One of the women was accosted by the alleged perpetrator's parents. His mother saying, "There's that bitch." She said they were screaming at me. They were using profanity. It was really like a really traumatizing event. So these employees drafted a letter to Olenek, and the letter asked that the alleged perpetrator be fired, and it demanded that the museum's board establish a clear process for dealing with future charges of abuse. It was passed around among the employees and signed by 18 employees. They couldn't arrange a meeting with him. He wouldn't meet with them. They had to give him the letter by bumping into him. And so this is bad. The board's been called in now. I don't know. It's a mess over there. Okay? And because now it is a thing before the National Labor Relations Board, who knows where this will go. But it's a long story. Very long. So, there's that. God almighty. I guess it'll just keep happening. It'll keep happening. Stories will keep coming out. Maybe there's a point at which we make some progress. I don't know. I really don't know. I'm starting to not have a lot of faith. Roger writes, did you see the story about Jane Fonda? She's asking us to forgive and try to empathize with Trump. What? Try to forgive and empathize with Trump and his supporters? She says they can't help it if they were not raised properly as children. She really meant it. Well, I think there's some truth in that. You know, you can't pick your parents. And we all, people who have a certain value system, generally learned that in their homes, from their families. I know I did. I was formed in that way. And that input was mostly from my dad, who was about as honorable a human being as I've ever known. And he just preached that kind of thing to us at the dinner table constantly. I was lucky. Some people grow up in families in which, I guess, they learn all kinds of wrong lessons. They learn to hate. They learn to look down on certain people. It's like that song that I often quote from South Pacific. That's where the damage does happen. You have to be taught before it's too late, before you are 6 or 7 or 8, to hate all the people your relatives hate. You've got to be carefully taught. But, you know, there are people who come from those kinds of environments who grow. So it is possible. I have lots of empathy, and I'm sorry. I'm going to prioritize who gets it. And hateful people are not going to be number one on my list. Jane Fonda seems to be much in the news of late. What, does she have a book out or something? I think. She finally figured out what I figured out about her a million years ago. And I always told the story about her. She was a classic woman of my era in that she only knew who she was by appending herself to a powerful man and being his girl. And so she changed over the years depending on what man she had chosen. So first it was, well, her dad, who was supposedly a pretty cold cookie. She goes to Roger Vadim, the French director, and he wants her to be this sex kitten, a Brigitte Bardot type. And so that is what she was with him. Barbarella is the movie that shows her Roger Vadim, Jane Fonda image. From that, she took up with the leftist founder of Students for Democratic Society, Tom Hayden, during the 60s. And, of course, that led her to being Hanoi Jane. Sex kitten to Hanoi Jane. That is a pretty, but Roger Vadim and Tom Hayden are really far apart. I was at a party with her and Tom Hayden in the early 70s in Madison. And my experience there was so depressing. I never liked her after it. She literally, I thought of, she was a strong woman. I thought of her as a strong woman. And she literally, metaphorically and literally, sat at Hayden's feet. She was on the floor at his feet, looking up like Pat Nixon, looking at Richard. And I remember thinking, he was a most unpleasant, I thought, human being, and a real womanizer. And I can say that with some assurance. He was all over women at that party with his adoring wife watching it. I was just stunned and sickened by it. So from that, Hanoi Jane, she takes up with one of the biggest capitalists in the country, the guy who starts CNN, the media mogul Ted Turner. And all of a sudden, she's a capitalist. And she's doing her exercise videos and making money hand over fist. And dressing like Ted likes her to dress. And I remember watching this progression of her and thinking, God, lady, find out who the hell you are. Who are you? Because I had the sense there was somebody interesting and talented and bright there. And since she got rid of Ted, I do not believe she's remarried, right? I think she's finally living without a man to define her. And I think that she's got a book out that's sort of like is maybe about her finally figuring out who she is. I don't know. But from that party in the early 70s, I had her absolute. I could have taken her aside and said, Jane, stand up. Very hard to be a woman then. You know, the lefty scene, of which I was a part, was about as sexist a scene as you can imagine. Make no mistake. That was totally male-dominated. And we girls were there to, I feel, service in any way imaginable the boys who got all the attention and credit. The girls did much of the work, the grunt work, because girls are supposed to do that and stay in the background. Just saying. Okay, Milton says he thought maybe our caller was not the best measure because his volume is always sort of down. All right, so if anyone wants to call from a regular kind of a phone and not driving in a truck or whatever, that, you know, do it, whatever. And we can take one more measure. It would be helpful if somebody would call. The odds are you only have to say a few words and I will roll my eyes and you'll be off. I don't know. Yeah, and Milton says, you know, even before the current difficulties, that caller was difficult to hear because of his handset. Maybe someone should give it a try. Susan sounded good on my end yesterday, but she was on a different line. That's why. Yeah, I don't know what. I thank you all for your suggestions and help. Little Tony writes, I saw the article yesterday about the Mattress Factory. I didn't read it all, but enough to know this is a big black eye for them. Maybe 2 black eyes. Wow. Would not have expected it from a place like that. No, but see, here's what I want to say when I tell you that, like, treating women like crap knows no boundaries. It's not Republican or Democrat, progressive or regressive. It's none of that. Thank you. We have a volunteer caller. All right, caller, do it. Talk at a normal tone.
Morning, Lynn.
Hello?
Can you hear me, Lynn? Hello.
Hello. I can hear you, but you sound like you're in a paper bag. But keep talking though.
Bag.
Wait, keep talking.
Okay, so hey, Lynn, I had some fun things happening yesterday in Pennsylvania. They're trying to legalize marijuana. I don't know if you know about that or not.
Yeah.
Read the papers at all, or they're discussing it over because I think they're realizing this is a medical marijuana that's been provided here in Pennsylvania. I think what's happening is the different people are looking at the numbers coming in, and they're being quite pleasantly surprised how good it's coming, how well it's going.
Oh, yeah.
And I think they're going to see this revenue and realize, hey, there's a lot more opportunities for income that we hadn't received in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it might happen, Lynn.
Well,
What do you think?
yeah, but it's talking about time. I don't see it happening in the next year or two. This state is slow. This state is slow.
It is.
I mean, but you're right. It's the money. It's the money, being dazzled by the money, that will eventually get them.
Right.
But I don't know how long.
Wow them enough to point
Yeah.
where they'll think that, hey, look at other states too that are driving all these revenues and incomes. I mean, they must see that it's working out pretty well without too many side effects. I mean,
Yeah.
everything has its drawbacks, and everything's positive. But overall, I think it's an overall positive
Yeah.
for most states.
Well,
They want to be taxed.
okay. Hey, thank you for the call, and thank you for the
No problem. Yeah, I wanted to see how did the voice come through?
Well, I think we got you up a little bit during it.
Okay.
I'm going to wait to see what the audience says. I know I'm still undoubtedly a heck of a lot louder than you. And you're not loud enough for me. I can hear you, but I shouldn't have to work at it.
Yeah, you're real low too. And on the phone, when I'm talking to you, you're real quiet. It's like I have to really listen to you.
Okay, well then.
It doesn't that loud voice that you hear on TV or radio. It's not like that on a telephone. It's like real muted.
Huh.
So.
Well, that's the first I heard that. Okay.
Yeah, it's not real loud.
Okay.
It's kind of quiet. And it's sometimes it's sporadic too. Like your voice will talk, and then all of a sudden it'll be delayed, and then it'll come back in. So I don't know. If that's work.
Okay.
I wish you luck. I know it's been a couple. I don't know what the hell. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's
Bye.
a Trump world we live in. So
It's a bitch. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Lynn.
Bye-bye.
You know.
Bye. If anyone wants to let us know what that sounded like to them, that might be helpful too. Mark writes, I watched a portion of the Anita Hill Clarence Thomas hearing. Man, is that something to watch. I had forgotten that Anita Hill was a law professor at the University of Oklahoma, and yet she was treated with such disdain by the Republican senators. Of note was, oh shock, Orrin Hatch, who was especially snide and mean, just like he is acting today. I do not believe that Anita Hill seemed to be the sort of a person who would be aware of the movie Long Dong Silver. And yet, Thomas simply responded by claiming that he was being subjected to a high-tech lynching. He said the magic word, and that was good enough. Tomorrow is likely to be an emotional scene. Funny, isn't it, how the lock her up crowd is now calling for due process. I don't think anything's funny anymore. I really don't. Oh, dear. Okay, well, if, as I said, if anyone can give us some feedback on how that went, that'd be helpful. And I, as I said, unless they postpone the hearing tomorrow, we ain't going to be here. Okay? Is that okay with you, Amy, too? If we can both be here. But I don't see that happening. So it's not like I want the day off. This will be total torture. Total torture. And I haven't heard what time it's on, but I've heard Thursday morning, so I'm assuming 10 is probably when it'll happen. So, So that's that. God help us all. And I just want to say to all the women who are really, really feeling shaky these days, you are not alone. You are not alone. There should almost be like support groups popping up for women just to get together and, well, whatever. This is going to be brutal. Hey, quickly, before we end, I have 1 minute. Did you know Dunkin' Donuts is no more? I'm not kidding you. They're changed the name. You know what it's going to be? They're dropping the donuts part. The very thing they're known for. It's just going to be called Dunkin's. Dunkin'. What do you think of that? I think it's odd. An attempt at rebranding. Why? I don't know. And also another rebrand of the week was Weight Watchers, ladies and gentlemen, which has ceased to exist. It is now simply called WW, which is not easy to say. WW, because they want the W to stand for wellness, as well as weight, as well as wow, as well as who knows what, but it's WW, okay? just in case you start hearing this stuff and you don't know what the hell people are talking about, I thought and I didn't get to my obit of the day, but you know what? They ain't going anywhere, so I can do it anytime. All right. Oy. All right. All right. I don't know what to say. The next time you see me, I might be, I don't know, a screaming banshee. It's quite possible. Or maybe wearing a straitjacket. That could be, too. Have a. Okay? See you Friday.
Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynn@pghcitypaper.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.